Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Is Hardware Holding Your Firm Hostage? I'm Caroline Hill. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider. Very much welcome to everyone joining us live. It's great to see you and to anybody listening in on the recording. I am joined today by NQ ZebraWorks, where we are going to take a step-by-step look at how progressive law firms are moving away from hardware as they shift to the cloud. And we're going to be looking at some examples of some of the most progressive firms, what they're doing to avoid being held hostage. Not that we like dramatic terminology. I'm joined by CEO Bill Bice. Hi, Bill.
Hi, it's great to be with you as always.
It's great to have you here. Bill was previously the founder of ProLaw, West KM, Boomtime, and Bloomberg's Draft Analyzer. Bill founded ZebraWorks in 2019 and merged with NQ in 2020 with the aim of enabling remote data collection, mobile scanning, document routing. And I'm also joined by Chief Revenue Officer Ken Bassham. Hi, Ken.
Hello, nice to be here. Thanks for letting me tag along.
Never tag in, Ken. Ken has been in the industry for over 20 years. And working with firms of all sizes to implement software solutions to drive the business and practice of their organization. And before joining ZebraWorks, Ken was at Thomson Reuters for over 17 years. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. Don't remind. No. Yeah. It was a long time. Yeah. Most of those 20 plus years for sure.
So thank you to everyone joining in. Please enable your chat function. I'm doing that as I speak. If you can please, if we can make sure that the chat function is working. We did have a webinar where we realized everyone was quiet because it was not working for some reason. If we could check that, that'd be amazing. We're really hoping that it's an interactive session. Certainly Bill and Ken are really keen. We've got some great talking points, even if you want to listen in. But obviously the idea is that you get involved. And I know that NQ ZebraWorks have got some really interesting projects on the go. So I'm sure that you'll be keen to sort of hear a bit more about those and to perhaps ask your own questions. We are going to talk, first of all, I think the pandemic, it underscored the need for less hardware, but obviously getting rid of it is much easier said than done, despite the fact that we know that hardware obviously is very problematic in terms of achieving your digital aspirations. So I think if we could, hi Ricardo, thanks for joining us. If you could talk to us about, for a start, perhaps Bill, you could start us off talking about what normal looks like at most of the firms that you see, if there is a normal.
Yeah, I'm not sure there is a normal. So we work with firms across the whole spectrum from mid-size to the largest law firms in the world. And it's really interesting getting that perspective. Mid-size firms actually tend to fall on the edges of the bell curve more. There's a lot of mid-sized firms that are very progressive, that have made a wholesale jump to the cloud, and there's some challenges with doing that. And at the same time, there are firms in that group that have really held back, and so we get to learn a ton from the whole spectrum. And this whole conversation started because of the pandemic. And Ken, you were talking about how we were feeling held hostage by hardware at that time.
Yeah, no, I mean that's exactly it. I mean, I think this topic came up because we experienced it ourselves, where one of our primary functions always lived on an MFD. Most people don't keep those, big copier printer scanners at their homes. And so our software didn't go with them when they were remote. So we had to kind of break out from being held hostage by that. Of course, we still work with MFDs, but we had to say, what are other ways that people could use our software that's not necessarily just tied to what we've historically done? And so when we're looking at this slide, that's kind of what we had to do, just meet people wherever they work and give them the exact same experience. So I think we experienced it first before we started wondering how to apply to our clients and to law firms.
Okay, and do you know what you've reminded me? So perhaps I probably didn't do. I imagine that a lot of people listening already know NQ works, but perhaps I probably didn't do a good enough job of really introducing. So just describe very briefly, if you don't mind, because we've got we've got so much that we're going to go on to talk about in terms of our steps to remove ourselves from hardware. But just describe what you were like in terms of the business pre and post pandemic.
Great.
You're in charge of sales, so go for it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So pre-pandemic, our primary function of the history on the NQ side was, of course, on bill back and cost capture. I think in 2011 or 2011, not to go too far back, was when we started digitizing documents and doing scan workflows and things like this. But our primary function was always being embedded on an MFP or MFD. The big device, either in the print room or the mail room or wherever that would be, or even on the floor. And so when the pandemic hit, we would talk to a lot of people. They say, hey, we love exactly what you guys do. If we ever get back to the office, which it seemed like that for a second, right? If we'll ever get back there, then I'll give you a call. So we had to pivot a little bit and say, we've got this great software. Currently, it held hostage, right, by these big devices that no one or not a lot of people are using. So how could we meet them where they are, which was wherever that they might be. I think most of us were home during that time. But then as things moved more hybrid, we started to figure out that, maybe mobile, maybe we should meet them there, because we are coming back, or we've been back, but we've always been mobile the entire time. So it really just made us try to think outside of the traditional business model that we would used, and see how we could meet people wherever that they might be and give them that exact same experience they had in the office, because that's really where it is. You see the slide says work from anywhere. I like to say work the same from anywhere, because we shouldn't have to sacrifice functionality just because we're not in the office, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And we're not returning to the office anytime soon. We just did a big survey on cloud, and what part of that was looking at hybrid working arrangements. And it's here to stay. I mean, I think we all know this, but it was really interesting seeing that kind of on paper. Well, when I say on paper, it was actually a digital report.
Well, and it's, law firms have always traveled. They've always worked, they've always been in places outside of the office. I think we just didn't originally acknowledge it. And then now there's just more structure around it, which made, all software providers have to think outside of those traditional models.
Yeah.
Legal's really always been hybrid. It's just now we're actually accepting it, and it's a normal part of operations now.
And I think your point about working the same from anywhere is really important. I think because we've all kind of accepted it, it's there to stay. Our stats showed that very few law firms are making their staff go back to the office even half the week in many cases. But it's about, how do we work as well from home, and I think that's absolutely that hardware is not form part of that plan. So talk about so did you want to, in terms of what normal looks like, did you go through your slides, Bill? Did you want to talk through some slides? Because I'm also going to ask you to start talking about best practice, but I don't know if you want to talk us through a little bit about what the slides we're looking at now.
Yeah, I would love to. The reason this becomes such a relevant conversation for us is because we're working in an area with workflows that are very bandwidth heavy when you're talking about scanning and printing and everything that happens behind that. And when we think about being held hostage by your hardware, it's really this issue of how do you work the same from anywhere, and is the infrastructure in your firm enabling that or getting in the way of doing that. And so I'm an absolutely huge fan of the cloud and building SaaS applications. The reason I came back into legal was to create ZebraWorks, which is our SaaS platform. So I'm a big proponent of it, but we also shouldn't see it as a magic bullet. And in the end, there's always hardware that is in the equation. So all we're really talking about is, so I don't really like elimination of hardware. It's more like, where is the hardware going to be? And it's, does the firm own it? And is it distributed in offices, or is it centralized in data centers, or is it hosted in a private cloud, or is it truly a SaaS application that that was born in the cloud? But there's hardware behind everything that we're doing, but how we implement this is going to determine how well it supports the reality of hybrid operations that we're in today. So if we look at where we've come from, so most firms are past this stage. We still work with some mid-sized firms that have decided to stay in the 2000s. Sometimes the bandwidth issue that's sort of represented here in the middle, that still is more challenging than we would like it to be, given these bandwidth heavy workflows that we're involved with. But what we're picturing here is sort of what we would like to consider the old state of, we've got an office, we have a bunch of desktops in the office, we have a bunch of servers in that office that are facilitating the applications for the people in that office. And of course, that's replicated across every office. And we've got connectivity between those offices, but maybe not the ideal level. And so that's kind of where we're coming from. And if this is the stage that you were at when the pandemic hit, it was a struggle to deal with that. And if we move forward to sort of the middle state, where you see a lot of firms at this stage, which is where we started to move to centralized data centers. There's often regional data centers to support regional sets of offices. We have some improvement in the bandwidth between those offices. We started rolling out notebooks to the attorneys that are really going to take advantage of them. There's still some local servers in the offices. We'll talk about a specific example of why it can be really challenging to get rid of all of those. A lot of firms are at this stage. The more progressive firms are then making, then for sort of the first jump, and a ton of firms have done this, right? They have moved to Office 365 for their email. They've moved to iManage in the cloud or to NetDocuments. So this often is the first widespread deployment of cloud applications in a firm happens at this stage. What we really want to get to is this next step, where we have really great connectivity between the offices in the firm. And what that lets us do is implement one central data center that supports all of the offices. And this centralization is really key to improving the efficiency of IT in the firm. You'll also see, and all these things don't necessarily happen together in sync. Moving everybody to notebooks is such a huge amount of flexibility that gets injected into the firm when you talk about really supporting hybrid operations. So this is the point that we want to get to. And I would argue, to some extent, once you've got that central data center, it's less about where that data center is at, whether you're physically hosting the hardware and racks, or whether it's in Azure in a private cloud. The point is that you've gotten to here.
Great, thank you for that. I don't know if anyone's got any questions on those slides. If you do, please do jump in. I know we're going to come on to challenges, but I want to make sure that I don't forget to ask you. I'm just curious about your point about it being hard to get rid of the servers in the office. Do you want to come on to that now?
Yeah, that gets us into a specific problem that we're actually tackling right now. So I'll skip ahead here to
we can
exactly
come back to that later if you want, Bill.
We can come back. Yes, we're allowed to do that. This is a great specific example of the issue with some of these servers that are difficult to get rid of, and printer servers are a classic example. And because if you're printing a memo and you expect that 4-page memo to pop out of the printer like right after you print it. And so having that ship around to, do a big circle on the network, or attempts to do this as a true SaaS application are just not realistic with where we're at in bandwidth today, even if you're, the most progressive firm in terms of what you've implemented. And yet you have all these servers that somebody's got to deal with and maintain. And so the solution to getting rid of these printer servers is to take these centralized printer servers that are sitting out there in every office, and even a smaller office is going to have one of these, and move that workload onto each of the individual computers so that we can get rid of the printer servers. So it's really kind of a clever trick. And when you look at the no server print solutions that are out there, that's what is really happening, is we're getting rid of that central printer server. We're distributing that work. We haven't gotten rid of the work. We're just moving where it's happening. But in reality, in a law firm, the vast majority of firms still want to do secure print release. So we still need to have one server. But now, if we're in that environment with that central data center, we can put in one small server that supports secure print release across the whole firm. And get rid of the 10, 15, 20 printer servers that we have distributed across our infrastructure.
Okay. All right.
But it's challenging to dig those things out of there. So this is a specific example that we're working on right now.
Okay. I'm going to come back because I know that's one of the hardest things, and I know we're going to come to talk about the challenges and why it's hard. Let's talk about. So do you think we're going to talk about some best practice. I think maybe you've covered a lot of that in your slides. I don't know if there's anything you want to add. And then we're going to talk about perhaps some really, I think it's all very well and good talking in high level terms, firms sometimes just say, well, it's great. Well, how do I do this in practice? Give me some practical. I know you're dealing with a lot of firms. I know you've got a lot of work on at the moment. It would be really good if we could talk through, perhaps I don't know if there's anything that we haven't talked about in terms of best practice, but also real, some really handy step-by-step guides to firms that are listening in saying, right, how do I manage what you're talking about, basically?
Well, I think it's a really interesting inflection point at the moment. So Ken, you always talk about when you're running IT and you have to explain this to your management committee or the attorneys in the firm, you always talk about how attorneys view whether something's in the cloud or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's, when you talk about mid-sized firms and how they were a bit more aggressive moving to the cloud, it was because they weren't technically moving to the cloud, they were just moving to hosting. And so there was always clever ways of saying it, is you would have a software that says in the cloud, which to them, that's exactly what it was. I always said at the end of the day, an attorney would say, when you're talking about cloud or somebody on the management committee or whichever, they would say, are we buying a server or are we not buying a server? Right. And it was just that simple. And to them, that was the definition of cloud. In a lot of ways it is. And that's what kind of separated, the move to the cloud for the smaller firms first, because really what they wanted to do was get rid of the hardware, have somebody else manage the hardware for the most part, let their IT staff work on all the other important stuff that's at the firm. And what they were doing is transitioning. We did this a lot with ProLaw and some other applications where you just moved it to a hosting provider. And if you talk to anybody at that firm about whether they're in the cloud or not, other than maybe they're the main IT person, they would say 100%, because they walk by the server room and there's less servers. But at the end of the day, that was a great step moving forward. And you talk to a lot of firms of all sizes when they say, and this is changing pretty rapidly, but and especially because of the pandemic, but they would say, we can't have anything in the cloud. And you would ask them, hey, what do you use for email? And they say Office 365. And so it was like, oh, okay, fair enough. So let's back up just a little bit. And it's not, I mean, it's not anybody's fault, right? But they've just done a really good job, Microsoft and of course others, of kind of hiding that fact a little bit, right? And we're just going to move to something that we access via our browser, which is in the cloud. So we have all these interesting conversations. So then now you start to see larger law has picked up. But there are challenges, and we always talk about this, Bill, like it would be nearly impossible, if not impossible, for all law firms, if they decided tomorrow, we're all going to the cloud 100%. None of the vendors can handle it. None of the law firms can handle it. And there aren't technically enough applications and resources that would be able to operate their firm the way that they do today in a whole, right? There are certain great applications that do that, but not operate their firm the way they do today and have it completely SaaS and in the cloud.
Well, it gets into one of the challenges that's really a best practice issue, which is that there are so many legacy applications in large firms that this idea that you're just going to pick up a core system and move it into the cloud it's unrealistic to look at it in sort of those simple terms. And this is where the problem comes between how, say, your management committee might be looking at the process versus the realities that your IT leadership has to deal with. And so we need to be able to communicate some of the intricacies that are involved with this, because we live with this day in and day out. We're in the middle of these really in-depth workflows that integrate and tie with all kinds of different systems. And so we had to tackle exactly this issue. So you have split systems where a portion of what you're working with is running in the cloud, and a portion is running either in your own data center or your own private cloud, which is really the same issue. And the way that we tackled it was to create what we call the ZebraWorks bridge. And that typically lives in the firm's DMZ, so it's a highly secure way that we can connect what's inside the firm's firewall with resources that are outside the firm. And so it connects with our ZebraWorks platform running in Azure. And the reason I'm using this example is because it shows the kind of work that you have to go through when you're in this transition time period and you're running this mixed platform between, quote, on-premise, wherever premise is defined in this case, and SaaS applications, because the security requirements. I mean, sometimes I feel like we're at the bottom of the hill, right? The law firm clients are at the top of the hill, and they're rolling the security questionnaires down, and it goes to the law firm. And the amount of effort that it takes for law firms to deal with this now is just incredible. And then that turns around, and they have to do the same thing with all of their vendors. And so, on the one hand, it's a lot of bureaucracy, but it is working to the extent that it is actually creating real focus on security within firms. And so you end up needing to implement what are fairly sophisticated ways in order to integrate these pieces together. And this is something that I'm just very passionate about, because I think the integration between core systems in a law firm, or sometimes the very lack of that integration, is the biggest missing component in how to get real leverage and get real return on this huge investment that firms make in their IT.
So interesting. And I wish I'd spoken to you before my cloud report, which is out soon. But because exactly, so they were talking about, obviously so with the pandemic, obviously Teams really sparked this new mentality around cloud. Like everyone started using Teams, and then progressively more people have gone Microsoft 365. And when I've spoken to people for the report, people are, the number of people saying that they're going to be completely in the cloud within 18 months was huge. But it's a case of, what does that look like? And obviously a lot of them are struggling with their roadmap, even in terms of, and there's a whole mishmash of, it's and like the fact that you pinpoint the fact that it's really difficult, to make it work. And then, when you said about it's not just a case of, we just pick it up and put it in the cloud, which is what sometimes it's made out to be, right? Like, and you've got so many core legacy applications. It's still that people are struggling, right, in terms of how to manage that, and even what the far near and far roadmap looks like. So does this form? I mean, it's fascinating to hear you talking about it. Anyone jump in if you've got questions. But so is this presumably a big part of the conversations that you're having with law firms at the moment?
It's the core of sort of every conversation.
Yeah.
And this is happening while this big shift is occurring. I mean, we had this negotiation with a very large law firm recently that at the start was, and Ken was kind of alluding to this, but at the start of the conversation, it was, well, we won't implement anything that has a connection to or talks to the internet. And then we showed them what we're doing and integration with Office 365 and the value of integration. And so it opened up the idea of, well, maybe this would be the very first project we could ever get approved that would make that kind of connection. And within a time span of 3 months of starting that to then getting to finalizing the project, it was a complete 180 to now you must commit to, you will make everything work in the cloud in the future. And that kind of just complete change is what we're right in the middle of. That 18-month timeline that you talk about, I mean, when you're working on it in the trenches and firms, that seems challenging to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you hear it all the time, right? Like, so a lot of times what people want to say is any new application that we do will be, cloud first. Yeah. That's what you hear. And if you applied this slide to the greater market, I mean, this obviously talks a lot about what we do, but there's, your billing system, a lead, Adder, whatever that might be over here where it says scan queue, print queue. And these applications take a long time and they're doing a great job of getting people to the cloud, or at least components of it to the cloud. So I think all vendors are kind of dealing with that hybrid approach a little bit. Like when Bill and I got back together in 2019, the whole idea is we're only developing SaaS programs, but then when we merge with InQ, we've got tons and tons of great clients with great software that's on premise. So we did all of our future development, right? So we're cloud first future development, but we still have to continue to enhance and maintain all of our on-premise products as well, to keep up with everything that firms need. So I think that bridge was great. And I think a lot of people are using it. We always, talk about iManage being a great example as well of helping people get to the cloud, but then also giving them not a ZeroWorks bridge, but a bridge of their own, which allowed them to use both systems, allowed them to do they set the goal of, and they did it fantastically, of where to get to, but at the same time met people where they were currently, if that makes sense.
It'd be interested if you listen to people listening in live, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, it just like, you don't have to put long sentences, but just in terms of what your cloud roadmap looks like in terms of duration. For example, if you intend to be, I know it's a really difficult one, but I'd just be curious as to anybody listening in what your roadmap is timeframe wise in terms of being either all cloud, whatever that means, or yeah, just kind of give us a clue, and then it'd be interesting. We could perhaps tailor some of the chat to your timeframes. So can you? I think you've already. I think that was a really good example that you gave of a project that you're working on. Are there other examples of big projects that you're working on that you can share that perhaps bring to light some of the work that you're doing?
Well, I wanted to add on to the iManage example because it really ties into the security and integration issue. So anybody who's running iManage, moving to the cloud, part of that was you had to change how you integrate with iManage and move to their universal API. That's a process that we had to go through. Everybody who integrates with iManage, many firms have internal integrations that they have built. And so that was something that, was announced with, I'm what was at least 2 years of telling people ahead of time, and it's still challenging for everybody to get there in time in order to make that switch. That has to be done for security reasons in order to be able to really run iManage in the cloud. They're doing that for really good reasons. And so that's just one example of all of the integrations that are running in a firm. And that just gets multiplied for every application that you want to take to the cloud. And so I think it's just a healthier way to look at this issue of where's the hardware and what's going to get us the most bang. So I have one more cartoon here just to make the point, which is that people talk about things, applications being serverless all the time. You get under the covers. Guess what? There's a server sitting under there. It's just a matter of where it's at. And so I think the conversation really needs to be about, where does it make the most sense for us to have this hardware? Because it is going to exist. What is it that's going to make that transition realistic, and what's going to give us the most flexibility to support what the reality is of where our firms are at today?
It's interesting. So you've got a comment. Thanks, Duncan. So saying your time frame is 1 to 18 months in terms of moving to the cloud. Most firms want off-premise hardware. I suppose that, what are your thoughts? So kind of yes, but is that to your point of almost illustrating the fact that the hardware, acknowledging that the hardware is somewhere?
The hardware is somewhere, and so most of the time when, and be interesting for Duncan to follow up on this, what that means is moving the data center from being inside racks that the firm is maintaining to now it's being hosted in Azure or your provider of choice, which is a great jump to make. And it's very similar to what Ken was talking about before with a smaller firm or a mid-sized firm just takes their whole infrastructure, and it's pretty easy for them to just lift that. It's just a lift and shift. We're gonna take everything we have today, and instead of owning the servers and maintaining them, we're going to put them somewhere else and have somebody else do that. We haven't fundamentally changed the architecture in doing that. We've just moved where the hardware is. It's a great move. It's the right thing to do. And with the right bandwidth in place, we've just opened up a ton of flexibility by doing that.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I get into lots of conversations about public cloud, private cloud. To me, it seems like, is it too simplistic to say the roadmap has to be public cloud? Is that, I know that there's a lot of challenges, but is that the conversation that you're having with a lot of firms?
I actually think the details of that are less important than we have somebody maintaining the hardware for us, and it's easy for us to bring up new resources and support the applications that we want. And so I look at it as two tracks. There is essentially the data center portion, which is just sort of a matter of where that exists, because those servers are going to exist somewhere.
Yeah.
And then there is the transition from on-premise software to the cloud version of that. So, a lot of cloud implementations of applications today are that same core technology with some changes to support hosting it for you in the cloud. So when you say that you're running your financial management system in the cloud, often that's the same financial management system that you used to be running on premise, and now that vendor is just running it for you. That's very different than a true born in the cloud SaaS application that was written from the ground up to be a SaaS application. And the reason that's such a critical difference is because that SaaS application was likely created with APIs through the entire process of building the application. And so the way that it works within itself is through APIs and through integration. And so it's sort of built into the genes of that application for how you can now integrate with it. And so when you're just, doing a lift and shift, you're still dealing with the same technical challenges and the same difficult integrations that you were before. It's better because now the hardware is being dealt with by somebody else. What you really want is the true SaaS application.
Yeah.
That because if all of your applications in your firm were true SaaS applications, then your ability to integrate those would be just on a completely different level. That's the true end game that we've got to get to.
And from my conversations, we are a long way off that, but making really good progress. Ken, as you said, we've been seeing some. I think it's really important to remind ourselves of the progress that we've made in the last 2 years, rather than perhaps my journalistic critical nature. But so Louise said to everyone, I don't know, I mean, this isn't really a question, but I don't know if you guys have got any observations, because I'm with that. Thanks for contributing. So NetDocs and Office 365, you've got NetDocs and Office 365 already in place. Prolog Workspace as an option for web access to accounting software in the next 12 months. I mean, it's not really a question, but guys, did you have any observations on that?
Well, it's a great example of the path, right? And so Prolog Workspace is let's create a layer that sits on top of the existing. That's a system that Ken and I created. It's a very old on-premise system, can certainly be hosted for you in the cloud. Workspace is creating a layer on top of that is more modern, has a little bit more integration capability built into it. So it's an example of how you move in the right direction. Long term, all of these things are going to be replaced by true SaaS applications. It's just what's the most intelligent way for us to get there.
Well, and it's like, I think everybody's struggling with how do you make your product hybrid, right? And I mean, even though it's new code, a lot of the stuff that Prolog has doing, we struggled with a long time ago, which was bandwidth. I mean, you'd have one tiny remote office and they wanted to run it on a VPN versus replication. And there were just certain things you couldn't do from a software standpoint in order to do that. And so Workspace is a great option because people aren't in the office necessarily. They need to access Prolog. They need to do it in a way that is the performance that they're used to. And so you put that on top, and then you can kind of open up all of those things, and you can develop a lot quicker too without rewriting everything from the ground up. So you see a lot of people do that, which is putting that fast layer on top on premise, because again, if everybody decided to switch tomorrow, it's still going to take years based on not bandwidth as we've been talking about it, but just to make those conversions and move them to the right place and things like this. When I see NetDocs and O365 already in place, I would say they're in the exact right space of where they should be, which it's just going to be a transition. It's never going to be the flip of a switch to get everything across. And so they're in very good company from all the firms that we speak to day in and day out.
Yeah, there you go. That's reassuring. And then Robert, so we're maintaining Prolog, purchased Filevine, CloudDB, expect 2-year transition. Biggest challenges are print servers, accounting, and AD connecting. I don't know if guys, you've got any thoughts on that. It's just great to have your contributions. Anybody else wanting their thoughts? Obviously, Bill and Ken are definitely the experts in this area. So if you've got anything you want answered, we can also provide you with contact details at the end if need be. But do you have any thoughts on Robert's?
I certainly do. I mean, we're always guided by the conversations that we have with our clients and other firms that we're working with. And it was interesting, a handful of years back, Amazon and Microsoft did a great job of, I think, infiltrating every trade show and client conference that you could do to tell people that your data is not as secure in your firm as it will be if you move it to the cloud and you've got 30,000 people thinking about security day in and day out versus the 5 people you have at your firm or whatever that might be. And somebody's doing a very similar job of that, talking about print servers, because it seemed like, I don't know, Bill, we had 18 calls in a row. And one of the things that came up, and we're talking firms of all sizes, were saying, how do we get rid of our print servers? And so it was just super interesting because you can see somebody out there doing a really good job of talking about serverless printing. And what I was going to comment on earlier, Bill, when you said that if we referred to laptops as mini servers, it would totally mess up this whole thing that we're talking about, right? Moving it to a different place, but we refer to them as laptops. So from a marketing standpoint, it's absolutely serverless because they're with us. They're not in one room locked up or anything like that. So again, I would say that Robert's in a great place because it's the conversation that we hear in the US, in Canada, all over the world. Everybody has the same kind of thought. And so it's interesting to just see everybody moving in the same direction. And I think, as much as I'd like to give credit to whoever's out talking about that, the pandemic has given so much momentum to these conversations and gotten people more on the same page than I've ever seen it in, as you say, 20 plus years. We won't say the actual number, but yeah. So it's we're in a unique place.
You're so young, though, Ken.
Huh? Yeah.
Like me. Robert, with a question, does the new ZebraWorks platform still do all the cost recovery injection that NQ Buildback did for prints and scans on premise?
It does. So we're doing all the stuff we've always done, plus connecting it to the cloud, and we've made the really hard choice to build true SaaS applications for our whole product line. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now. And it's really because of the argument I was just making. Like there's value in doing lift and shift, but the end game is we need real SaaS applications. And so the logic behind the merger we did a couple of years ago was to do exactly that. And it's why I wanted to come back, was to be part of this move to SaaS in legal. And the pandemic was just this sort of black swan event that has, as awful as it was, is also an accelerator around these issues that we're talking about. And amazing how well firms, the IT departments and firms just pulled off miracles in order to keep these firms working. I think we need to keep reminding firm management of that fact. Like two most profitable years in law firm history were during two of the most challenging years ever, and it was thanks to IT that made that possible. And we need to keep firm management's focus on that, because getting to the end goal that we're talking about here is going to have this same kind of significant advancement for firms. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be cheap, but you don't really have any choice, because you're looking at so much advancement coming down the pike in legal, that if your firm doesn't make those investments and doesn't make this jump, it's just going to be so difficult to compete down the road.
Yeah, I think I feel like, so I don't want to go too long, but I love chatting with you guys. Is there, and I also love the Scooby-Doo cartoon in the background. Is there, I know we were going to come back on printers. I think maybe we covered that in terms of why it's so hard. Did you think we've done that justice in terms of why it's so hard to get rid of them? I know I said I'd come back to them. I feel like we've kind of touched on it. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you on that?
No, I think we did it because of we love firm feedback, and we jumped on it because of our firms telling us that is exactly the feedback that we're seeing from Robert in the chat here. It is a difficult problem. Sort of related to that is the practice management issue. The first thing that we tackled with ZebraWorks is going and integrating with practice management systems. First one we did was ProLaw, because we know that one really well.
Makes sense.
And there's actually a huge lift that you can get out of taking a SaaS platform, integrating it with a on-premise financial management system, regardless of where it's actually living. But the technology stack is a traditional on-premise tech stack. But getting that data warehouse that now has an API wrapped around it, and your ability to build and customize workflows that are leveraging that data, that's another great way in which you can make the transition in steps. You don't have to get the whole thing all to SaaS from day one, but yet you can get a ton of the benefit of moving in that direction. So that's exactly what we've done with ZebraWorks and the practice management tools that we've built.
Okay. Well, look, I think we're going to leave it there. It's so interesting. It's such a massive challenge. All the firms that I speak to as well, I'm sure you can imagine, we are battling this on a day-to-day basis. It's really interesting to hear your thoughts on getting around some of these issues. I will be sharing your contact details, so if anyone does have any follow-up questions, they can get in touch with you direct. And people listening in, thank you so much, and thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your questions, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. So Ken, Bill, thank you very much for your time. It's been great chatting.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.